Okay, let's kick it off. I will go through some intro slides and then we can continue the session. So good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, everybody. So depending on where you are connecting from. So welcome again to our Platform User Group Stuttgart, our March edition. So let's go through some main things. So if you still didn't, you can still subscribe to one of our channels so you can follow on Meetup what is happening, what are the sessions upcoming. Also on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and all the recordings from sessions that were recorded are posted on our YouTube channel of our Platform User Group Stuttgart. Also, again, your host, myself and Christian today, with you, so going week by week, trying to provide you as much content as possible and the best speakers that we can find out there. Just a quick thing, so a bit different format. So every second Tuesday, myself and Nicola, we are going with Data Jazz on Tuesdays. Next week, Tuesday, we have a Phil Seamark from the other side of the world. That's why it's 8 p.m. So join us with a little bit different format. And on our regular sessions here on user group, we'll have week from now, just the day before SQL Bits, Melissa Coates is joining us with top essential actions for governing Power BI. As I already mentioned, day before is Data Jazzers with Phil Seamark. Fomi will join us 16th of March with in-page navigation, and 23rd of March, Megan Longoria is talking about top essential actions for governing Power BI. And so you saw all the upcoming things, all which is coming in advance. And today, it's a pleasure to welcome Steve with us, Steve Campbell, and he will be talking about learning path to advance your Power BI career. Steve, welcome. Welcome to our user group, and stage is yours.
Excellent. Great to be here. Let me take over the screen share here. Is this sharing correctly now? Good. Yep. See my introduction slide here. Yeah, nice to meet you, everyone. So today's topic is learning path, to advance your Power BI career. It's a bit of a different topic than some of the more technical ones, and I want to kind of go through who I am, what was the inspiration for this, and what we'll kind of be talking about today. So this is me, right? My name is Steve Campbell. So I actually run the reporting capability at Cognizant Microsoft Business Group. So we're a consultancy throughout the world. They're heavily in America and India, but we also have a European division here. So I'm also a data platform MVP. I've actually been around, so I live in the UK now. I've also lived in Australia, and I was most recently in the United States. I was there for about 8-9 years, so just come back from there. So part of my job, I do a lot obviously in Power BI, but a lot is managing the team. I do a lot of recruitment in Power BI, and I also do a lot of training and training plans. So I've seen a lot of patterns with people come in, trained a lot of people up, and hired a lot in Power BI. So I wanted to put this session together and kind of run through different options that we have, assuming we are Power BI developers, assuming we use Power BI quite a lot in our job, but really focus on Power BI, focus on what are the options and what do we have to learn, because a lot of times we dive in a bit hard and go very strong on learning, all the tips and the tricks to do Power BI desktop, all this sort of stuff. There's also typically two sort of types of people. You normally have the IT side and the business side who come and learn Power BI. And actually, it's a lot more common, I've noticed, from the business side for people to start using it. It's its main selling point, right? You don't need all this back end skills necessarily. You can kind of pick up and access your data. However, this is how I came in, and I was a big Excel user, right? So I came in through Excel, data analyst. I was a fiscal analyst. Started using Power BI kind of through that method. There's a lot of stuff, I think, when I look back that I wish I learned first, and I kind of skipped over outside of necessarily using the product. So that's really where we want to go today. How I see the basics and the fundamentals that we should be learning. And then also what I look for, especially when I look to promote people, when I look to hire architects, and the path that I've taken to go up and to kind of go through that, and I've seen other people take and advance through their career. So let's kind of go for roles. And we see a lot of this, and there's a lot of people who start as a data analyst or a Power BI developer. And I think I kind of want to throw this out. And also, I do want to say, if you have any questions, this is a very, as I say, it's not a technical, not a demo heavy. It's not really Power BI. We won't be using Power BI or going into technical. So please feel free to hit the chat, raise your hand, and we can definitely have this as an interactive session. I know we're all virtual and we're doing this for a while, but please do ask any questions that you have, or even thoughts. If you have thoughts or experiences, it would be great to share with the group. So I think what my main thoughts on these roles, right? And a lot of people say, what's the difference between a data analyst versus an engineer and a scientist? And I think it's a confusing question in my mind, because a lot of these are defined by the company themselves. And although most of these roles fall into similar sort of duties, it's not a strict, especially cross countries and cross industries, there's not a strict definition to each of these. So a typical starting path for somebody who's getting into data would be through, a data analyst who typically does, Excel heavy, kind of maybe some Python and R, something like that. And then moves on a lot more, maybe we focus in Power BI developer. I know data scientist, to me, felt like the natural next step. I think a few years ago, it was called the sexiest job, especially in the data realm and that kind of stuff. To me, though, it falls outside. It's very different to a lot of what we do in Power BI and what we go through in that respect. I see a lot more data engineering down in this bottom corner here as a lot closer, and to be honest, a lot more what the current market needs. Data engineer is going to be somebody who is really, manipulating data, getting data from A to B, essentially, and put it in the right format in place B. So while I think there was a lot of, in the last few years, data science became really popular. People love doing the analytical part, but it's a big mix, and there's a lot more statistics. And when a lot of people ask for data science, they really want statistics a lot of the time and don't need data science. You'll see there's a lot more auto ML. Power BI is a great example of that. Power Apps is another one, right? Where there's auto ML, maybe not as accurate than if we hire data scientists to write algorithms. But a lot of companies, it kind of hits their need unless you're a very large organization or specialize in analytics. Data engineers definitely becoming, I think, a more needed position right now in the market. I know from trying to hire people, there's a huge gap in the market, and it's growing even more for data engineers, people who can get the data ready or viewing for running data science. We have a hand up as well. There's a, can't see the name. If you have a question, you can come off mute if you want.
Yeah, I just had a question. You said like a data scientist kind of relates to more kind of statistics. Just curious, like according to me, a data scientist could be someone that is proficient in computer science and on the business side as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think typically I always like to hear the traditional explanation that I've heard. Again, this is where there's not a underlying definition, right? There's not just one thing a data scientist could be. I could call someone a data scientist on my team if I wanted to. It's a job title. They couldn't know anything. But traditionally, right, it is a lot of computer science. But I think it's what people don't realize is it's statistics and computer science. It's a balance between these two. You need to. A lot of people look at it as an AI engineer and kind of hitting and writing algorithms, I think, and think that's what a data scientist is going to be doing, is just writing algorithms. To be honest, a lot of data scientist work is going to be data engineering, right? Cleaning data. You do need a lot of statistics knowledge as well, I think, to really understand the algorithms you're writing and to know how to interpret and to give the best results. Because I can just apply an algorithm to data to understand and to deploy it. I think there's a very high level of statistics. Typically, you see, I think traditionally data scientists, when they first came out, was known as a PhD role, right? I know some companies, to be called a data scientist, you would need a PhD. Stats was a common one for that. The other one being computer science. So I think there's a really balance between the two, and as well just cleaning data, being able to get data and clean it. To be honest, does that answer your question? I mean, do you think that's
Yeah. It does. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think this is where people, see data science. It had this big thing behind it of, as I said, it was called the sexiest job in a lot of places. But data engineers are really good. Data architect is going to be one which is, I was running out of icons here, as you may be able to tell, but orchestrates the thing, I think, is what I was going for. Basically, data architect relies a lot more, and you can have a solution architect as well, a lot more in experience. And that's really knowing how to set things up and not necessarily going in and doing all the work. It's more of a step back from what a lot of us like to do, and a lot more on laying out kind of the work. Again, there is a lot knowing things like how security applies and the governance pieces. That's really important here. But then I also want to switch back. So we see these roles as advancements to kind of being a data analyst or a Power BI developer, which they definitely can be. But I don't want to discount the roles of data analysts and Power BI developers, because I think you could have an unbelievably successful career staying as a data analyst and a Power BI developer. You can get very, very far if you're very specialized and do this very well. So I think my point here is it's not necessarily an advancement to be a data scientist from a data analyst. Often it can be, but you can be a very, very good data analyst for a very profitable large company, and you will be at a higher level than probably a lot of data scientists, maybe at smaller or less data advanced scientists. Could you say data architect is relating to cyber? I mean, I think typically a data architect's role is that to look at the solution, and you normally have either a data architect and a solution architect. A solution architect typically is on this, but is higher, even more stepped out to kind of see the solution as a whole. When you have a project running and maybe 4, 5, 6 people on it or more, you need some sort of person to set up direction of the project and just what the technologies and advise on the technologies. In Power BI, especially if you want to be a Power BI data architect, really thinking about how we're going to deploy as well. How's the security model going to work? How are we going to roll this out to the company? How are all the sources? Where do we do our transformations? Do we do stuff in Power Query or do we do it back? Making those decisions, which a lot comes from experience, I think is the key. And this is something I see a lot, and a lot of what I'm going to go through is mistakes I've personally made, and I think is really beneficial to hear mistakes that someone's made as well that we can learn for, but also things I look for in my team, and advice that I've been given from other people who hire as well. You may have seen sort of similar to this, and this is really that breadth versus depth. And now, this is purposely vague, but you can see there's 5 different bars, right? And we can say the blue bars can show your ability in each one of these skills. So we can think of one bar. So if I go here, this bar here, this could be one skill. So maybe, for example, in Power BI, it could be something like Power Query, right? This one could be DAX, and this one could be, using the desktop tool. And it doesn't really matter exactly what, but you tend to get these different ways people learn and different options that people go for. You'll have a generalist, right, who is good at quite a lot of skills, but doesn't have a speciality in one. And by the way, this is the same. If you add up all these bars, they're going to come out the same amount of points, right? So I did this in Excel. So each bar has 10 points. So the amount of blue is the same in each of these. So it's kind of looking at how someone can distribute their skills given the same amount of time and learning. So typical generalist will be, just know a bit of everything. So I might go and sometimes it's tempting to do this when we learn, and there's nothing wrong with it. And it's saying, I want to learn everything. So I want to look at Power Query, I want to learn DAX, I want to learn doing visuals, and I want to learn visual design, I want to learn governance. If you do that, you typically can't learn too deep in any area because you're trying to learn so much. So you have this nice generalist. Very useful, and we'll go through kind of where we see this. We also have a specialist. Specialists come to mind, right? You think of Mark and Russo from SQL BI, that kind of stuff. You see a lot of the consultants very, very strong in a certain area. We'll also look at a rounded, where you might be a bit more specialist in 1 or 2 skills. So maybe I'm really good at DAX, but I'm still not as an expert as the SQL BI guys or someone as specialist in there. But I'm quite rounded. I have a bit more of the other skills supporting DAX. One thing I think that you want to try and avoid is being too specialized and ignoring other skills. So maybe I just open Power BI and all I do is learn DAX, but I don't learn anything about databases, right? And maybe I don't learn the fundamentals of governance. These are really important. So yes, maybe you can answer the hard DAX questions, but without a bit of knowledge in everything, at least a foundational knowledge in the other subjects, typically when you make recommendations, you find them very one-sided, and they might be a good recommendation to solve a specific problem. Like you might have a DAX problem and you'll be able to solve it, but it might, you might end up doing stuff in the back end, making different tables that, as your solution as a whole, is not best for the solution. So it's kind of being that too laser focused on specific areas, without having a thought of the solution as a whole, really can be quite detrimental in some places. So we'll go through kind of now the roles, and then I'm going to move on to the main bit after we go through the roles of the Power BI map that we have that I've been developing, kind of to help learn these skills and how to advance. So I think first is a developer, right? And this is kind of where we see them. Developers get kind of quite well-rounded tech skills, and you might favor certain areas. Typically, you start as Power BI developer and analyst, you could say, get into senior. And I think to be a good developer, this is where you need these well-rounded skills. You can have some focus, definitely some specialties. Maybe you're a developer with Power Query specialties, but really having well-rounded does help. Architect, again, still pretty well-rounded, and this is where you have technical skills, but a lot of what you're doing as an architect is being able to give it advice. I think that runs off experience. So if you kind of want to go through an architect role, and a lot of this is just your preference on maybe what you feel comfortable with, but as an architect, you're going to be giving advice to either your customers or within your organization whoever's in charge of the project. Comes from experience. So getting a lot of experience in different areas is really good way of advancing to an architect. And again, not going too far specialist down one area, really trying to build everything up together. Not going too quick and then picking one area only, but going around thinking of your different skills. And we'll get a bit more focused on this later on what they could be. But yeah, that's kind of the key for an architect there is more that advice. And you're starting to maybe step a bit back from the problem solving. Again, a specialist. I think if you want to be a specialist, you still need rounded knowledge. I think that's my key point here. That you be really good in one area and you can solve specific problems. So I might be really good at DAX, but you should still think about your governance piece. So maybe if I'm really good at DAX, I still need to know how governance and security works when I'm deploying my solutions, because maybe I write a complex DAX statement, but it's not going to work with the security model I have in place, right? And maybe I can write it, but it's going to be slow because my refreshes aren't going to be quick. So I think having that rounded knowledge, not just going too gung-ho and too focused on one area, but really getting your skills up together. And there's a lot more, and we'll go through all the different areas. And I think within Power BI, there's a lot more than we think, and there's a lot more fundamentals. I think the next one I want to go manager, right? Because this is a career path. I think with a tech skills like Power BI, managers, definitely you need some rounded knowledge. But if you go towards that management level, know that you'll be stepping away from tech skills, right? You won't be analyzing Power BI every day. And this is a really interesting one because I see a lot of MVPs who I talk to in the community. They do go down this route. A lot, though, step away from management because they love doing the analysis. And, I know quite a lot of the Power BI MVPs. Not many of them are actually managers. To be honest, most of them are probably independent consultants or specialists, with rounded skills. So I think while thinking about management and going to be a manager seems like a natural progression, something what's great with tech and Power BI and data is it's a route, but it's not necessarily the only route. And I think we go here, right, where you kind of think this technical versus people skills, and things like Power BI, I think really opens that up. If you want to learn and you want to go through and become a better developer, management's not the only route. You can be very, very lucrative, right, and make a lot of money as a consultant once you have those fundamental and well-rounded skills. Again, so going independent. This is I think an option now that we've seen a lot of changes in the last 2 years in the world. I think one thing that's happened, right, we can say, me being in London now, I'm going to guess we're from quite a few countries, just in this group. It's become easier to go independent and to kind of do your own thing. But I think to really be successful, you can be rounded, but you must stand out. Definitely is a very popular route for consultants if you go into consulting or if you just go to Power BI. You definitely need to have all the skills though and be an expert in your trade. And you can be, independent. You could be a contractor, for example, or you could start your own business. Start your own business is probably something you'll need to be working to for a few years, I would say at least. But if you want to go contractor and just get contracts, there's a lot at the moment. So again, specialists can do quite well in this area when you're a bit more specialist in a certain area, right? So really good at governing or deploying reports, or you're really good at building models, or really good at big data. But you really do need excellent skills. So it's something I wouldn't rush off to do first. Get that experience and run through the skill iterative process, which I'll go through next. Run through that a few times and make sure you understand your skills and what you're missing and where you are. Again, it can be lucrative. So, it's a good industry to be in, learning Power BI at the moment. Opening up virtually is being great because it gives people more and more opportunities as we do this. Obviously, though, going independent can be unreliable, which is where a lot of people don't like doing it. And again, this might be why you want to wait until you really are sure that you're at that level to go in and do your own thing. So now going to learning iteratively. So is there any questions, any thoughts or from anyone experiences on what I've said once I drink some water? Awesome. So now I kind of want to go through my learning iteratively thought process. And you could put the arrows in a number of ways here. It doesn't necessarily mean this is the only way to learn, but going through something like a Power BI, I really think this is very important. And let's kind of run through this. So we always start, right, with the fundamentals. So again, start with the fundamentals. I think that's quite obvious, but start with the fundamentals in enough areas. So when you're thinking about databases and the fundamentals of data, the fundamentals of DAX, what we can see here is obviously we have the fundamentals, then I'll say the next stage is basic understanding, then you'll have an advanced understanding, and then you get into the optimization. So we'll kind of go through what I mean by that. But you can see as we go through, we have a number of arrows. The first one, that is after you've done every stage. So once you're learning a new skill and you've learned the fundamentals, let's say we've learned the fundamentals of DAX. Every step that you take and you think, I've done this fundamental course, or I've done the first one, look at the theory and the best practices. What I mean by theory is we're often good at learning programs and coding language, that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of back-end theory, and we'll go through this a bit in the map next. There's a lot of underlying theory. DAX is a great one, right? We have context transitions and all this kind of stuff that goes on in the background. Also, please look at best practices. So one thing I think with learning Power BI, how I learned it is I actually made a game, right? So I opened Power BI and I made this point and click game. And that was great, right? It took me through learning fundamentals and the basic and advanced. But always go back to best practices. A lot of the cool stuff that we can do in Power BI, we shouldn't actually be doing, right, in main best practices. You've got to think long term and making sure that your reports are going to run. So every step, checking in, what are the best practices? What should I be doing? It's not just about learning the skills and being really, really good. It's about having to know them. And sometimes the best practices mean doing things very simply instead of doing things more complicated. So I think typically, though, once I get to the advanced understanding, I've gone through the fundamentals of DAX. Maybe I've got my basic understanding of DAX. I can write some code. Now I've got a bit more advanced, right? I'm getting pretty good at calculating. I can do variables, iterators, that stuff. Go back and relearn the fundamentals. I can't say how important that is to go back and just start again with the fundamentals. Obviously, you might not go through the whole process and spend so much time, but revisiting fundamentals and revisiting basic understandings is going to really, really help. And the thing we're here, especially with something like DAX, this is one of the most ones. When you first learn fundamentals, until you get to that stage of advanced understanding and you've had a lot of practice, you probably won't have a time to actually implement, and you'll be learning it in your head, but you won't really understand why, because you haven't had that experience of cases where you've had to use it. So I would go back to the fundamentals. And the final stage of Power BI is optimizing. And this is where you really get understanding of the product and really know how to tune things. So for example, in DAX, right, this will be how to make your DAX queries quicker, how to use DAX Studio to go through and run them. In building models, this will be how to optimize tabular and how to make your models more efficient, refresh quicker, and how to have them, have less storage. That's kind of the first half of it. Just the background, right, and really looking at the different levels. I think the key points here is we learn iteratively. Don't just think we're going to start at the fundamentals and then just keep advancing. It's a cyclical process. We have to go back and revisit what we learned and revisit fundamentals, because it will click kind of the second, third time once you have that experience. And then the other key point here is, there's a lot of different roles here. I don't think there's necessarily a definition on all of them, but I think more importantly, it's how you distribute your skills, right? We only have a certain amount of time. You could learn down the rabbit hole of anything. You could, between DAX, Power Query, governance, distributing them in a way that really aligns to what you want to do. If you don't know, just start trying to learn everything slowly and just to, be a generalist. You'll probably gravitate to some areas you like more and start being more specialist in them, but you don't have to be. You could be either. So with that, I kind of want to go through. We have here the learning map. So this is available on my GitHub. I will kind of get the link out for you now. Bear in mind that this is very new. There's going to be a lot of updates to it. Let me just, I'll post the link in the chat. Address. This is kind of stage 1, and you can see I've got this nice little watermark here saying trails under development. So the idea is I kind of took this idea. There's a really good one in data science, which is somewhat similar, but I modified the idea quite a bit. This is a path, right? And we want to walk. These are different trails we can take. It's a learning path, I'm using it literally. And we want to learn in Power BI, the different areas of Power BI. So you can really start, you can see pretty much everything is in loops. So we can start down our path and learning the skills. And then each of these are kind of key landmarks that we visit. Is a skill that we're going to learn something about that. To the left, this is more theory based. So anything on the left hand side is definitely a lot more theory based. It's the fundamental, the knowledge that you need. This is often something that people kind of skip over a bit, and I think is really, really important. And to the right, this way, this is a lot more technical based. So this is learning, you see DAX, Power Query, languages, learning the desktop and actually learning how to do it. It's the skills you need to click and to go through. So if we go to the top, yeah, so I've lost my mouse. Ooh, thing is going crazy. Here we go. So you can see, and I'll work on these color coded because I haven't really colorblind checked them. So it might be, if you are colorblind, I apologize. I will be making these easier to kind of see, but I think you can kind of guess which ones are which. We have the red route, the walking paths, which are the fundamentals. We have the blue, which are the core skills. The green are advanced. I'm going to add to this the best practices and the optimization parts. This is coming, right? So as I say, this is version 1. We'll publish this out on PowerBI.tips as well when it's a bit more refined. But this is a pretty good start, and you can get through the skills. So the idea is we can walk, and the grays are just kind of paths to connect us. So you can really start anywhere you want, but you might want to start down here at the bottom. Or we can walk through, and you can see that these are grouped. So the first station that we'll get to, the first stop, is really about data modeling. So if we go to the left, we can learn about databases. The idea is you can make different paths depending on whether you want to be a generalist, a specialist, or what, but it's really looking to try and map out your career path, see where you are now and see which routes you want to take. If I was brand new to this, I would probably start by going through the red paths, the fundamentals. So I would typically go to the left first because that's the underlying theory, and then hit to the right, which is more the skill. So I can walk up here and I will start going to the left, right? And the first thing I'm going to start learning about is dimensions and facts. So data modeling and databases, right? Dimension and fact tables, looking at star schemas and looking at data types. And I do hope to add more stops and kind of evolve this. And realistically, this is going to be a living document because these skills do change and update over time. So just relying on something, that's 10 years ago, it definitely, isn't necessarily going to be true today. Would this help preparing in the DA 100? I think to a certain extent, it's specifically not pegged to any exam. The DA 100 is definitely going to be more this right side where it's the physical what you have to do. I'm really glad you brought that up as well, because I think there's the DA 100 is great, right? It's if you're learning Power BI, that's the exam to do. One thing I always tell my staff is don't be certification collectors, which is I just try and get as many certs as I can. This is coming from a bit more of a personal development standpoint, where it's not necessarily trying to pass a certain exam. I'm sure this will help, and I think if you follow this, it will give you a lot of experience. It's not going to cover everything in exam specifically, so you would want to still go through the exam preparation, but it's more that longer term and more for yourself in terms of a career path. Not necessarily there's nothing you get from following it, right? I mean, it's not an award that you get at the end or a certificate, but it's that rounding yourself to take that next step and to get the required experience that will really help you advance in your path. So I think this alongside the DA 100 and just using this as a direction on what and how to learn is the idea. So yeah, I might do this red route, right? And then I can come back to learn these first three things. And then I might go around to the data modeling side, right? And it's relationships. Again, these are the fundamentals of kind of using data modeling in Power BI specifically. The next is really, now that we've kind of thought about that, it's really that visual and Power BI desktop. And again, to the left here, this is a lot of theory. And to me, the left side is a lot more important, I think, because the right side, a lot of people just dive in, and a lot of people, as I showed that graph at the beginning, say too specialists in a couple of areas. So typically you learn Power BI desktop, and this is like using the actual program Power BI desktop, right? What's typical is people do Power BI desktop and people do DAX. And that's where they get really specialized, or maybe Power Query. It's good, don't get me wrong, definitely feel free to specialize in those. But don't miss out on the rest. Don't miss out on the theory and these other bits, especially governance and administration at the top. So this visual design, for example, maybe I follow the fundamental, this red route, picking the right visuals, context, focusing attention. You can see as I go to the harder routes, this blue and the green, we start thinking a lot more theoretically on this left. Color theory, something called Gestalt principles, and then telling a data story. And then even further on the green, we have this thing called golden ratio, and then there's a Fibonacci sequence where it's really how your attention, when you see a dashboard or a report, how your attention is drawn, and you follow, subconsciously you follow a certain pattern. Sizing of things, right? Sizing should be similar. Creating layouts is a really powerful one. I do a lot of my Power BI work in Adobe XD, right? So when I start creating a report, I do a layout first, and the layout's a background file that decides where all the elements go. It decides where using these principles, the Gestalt principles and my color theories, right? So although this left side is not really anything to do with Power BI, I could learn this without ever opening Power BI. When you go and you start thinking, right, formatting visuals, creating visuals, this gives you the fundamental knowledge to really help that. So again, I think here what would be really useful is following the red path round, right? Following the left, go through the red path on the right. Go through then, if you wanted to specialize, go through a bit more the blue path on the left, go through the blue path on the right. And it depends where, if you want to specialize, if you want to do them all one at a time. But what I wouldn't do is just start at one and just keep going on the green and green. Get the red in all of them. Go through this and make sure you understand the fundamentals in every step. I'm going to be adding more as well. As I say, this is quite basic. There's probably a lot that isn't on this map right now. Feel free if you want to come to the GitHub and make suggestions. Can't promise I'll add them in. There's only a certain, there's only a certain amount of stuff on a page where we have to prioritize and group stuff together. But this is going to be an open source and available for everyone. Going up as well. So now we kind of have that getting the data from your sources into your Power BI model. So kind of going through, as I say on the left, this is the ETL process, and this is thinking about data itself. So looking at Roche's maxim, this comes from Matthew Roche from the Power BI team. Learning these tools and tips. Again, web APIs, basic SQL querying. It's probably not a good idea to write SQL most of the time directly in Power BI, but having that skill is going to help you when you do come and start learning stuff, or if you need to write a view in the back end. And then going through to the Power Query stage, right? And I think there's a lot we can go in. Maybe you only need to get to the blue area as well. I'm not saying, again, it will be quite hard to try and hit the green. And remember, there is 2 more stages coming out of this. There's the best practices and the optimization, which are going to come as well, and a few more. But that's really, kind of where you go. I'll get to that question about the DA100. I think they'll follow in at the end with some resources that I can think of. So yeah, so really, hitting all these red first is great. Then kind of working on the blue, and then maybe deciding where you want to specialize, where you want to optimize. Tabular models, this is a big one, right? This really, tabular models will have a lot more in the optimization stage, because this is how you get to things like when you want to become architects, right? Knowing how to optimize and knowing how to reduce the storage. This is really, again, a lot about the tabular model itself. More that theory on the left, and then kind of off that is that DAX. And DAX is an interesting one because you can really specialize in DAX. And again, right, each of these landmarks, each of these stops, if I go to date time intelligence functions, let's take that one for example. You can know it basically, and you can know it again. This is the point of going through the path, right? If I go through the red path, I hit these first 4, and I'll go through the blue path. I'll reevaluate, I'll re-go over them, make sure I understand the fundamentals again, and then go on to the next stage. It might not take as much time, the second or third time round, but it's really important to revisit the fundamentals. And I say that, and it will just help you learning so much. This goes into where I say, try not to be a certificate collector, a cert collector. By all means, take as many certifications as you can, and definitely go for them. But don't. I would advise not just to try and get them to display, right? Just for the sake of getting them, because you'll forget your knowledge if you just do it once and then don't go back to it. So this iterative process is kind of how you advance, and I think really how you retain knowledge. It's proven. We've all learned stuff in school or something like that, probably forgotten most of it. So reevaluating and re-hitting them. Governance and administration, and this is a really good one as well. This is something that is often overlooked until you get. Sometimes it's thought of when it gets a bit more advanced, or you advance into an architect. However, I would say, definitely do the red ones. Make sure go down the fundamental route and also go through the core skills. My advice would be, when you're doing this whole map, go up the tree, or you go down the tree if you wanted, down the path, whichever way, you don't have to do it necessarily in sequential order, but hit all the red paths, go through all the red routes first and then visit all the red stops, then go back and aim to do all the blue ones. Kind of at that stage, maybe this is where you're thinking, I think that gives you a good generalist when you're at those red and blue and you have all those skills. Bear in mind, we'll add to this and help. Then start thinking about becoming a bit more specialist. And that's where maybe you don't need to go through the green on every one. And once these optimization and best practices, you definitely won't probably have time to go through, you can't max out every single one because you'll start not being able to reiterate and forget some of the others. But, even thinking about securities and thinking about, we've got center of excellence and self-service, right? Not typically something an analyst needs. However, it will make you a much better analyst because when you're preparing, your work and your data, knowing how to roll this out, knowing what context what you're doing is going to be used in is going to be really, really helpful. Then administration, again, we talk about the Power BI admin portal. I'm guessing probably a lot of people here aren't Power BI admins. It's usually a function not done by a data person, it's an IT. But knowing that is really going to help you because people might have some questions, and if you're the one who can answer and seen as a specialist in this, and this is where that breadth of skills, right, where you have skills in each area, it's going to really, really be helpful. And just, being able to answer questions to IT people puts you in that position of knowing a lot more. So as we say, we've got the new channels opening soon. We'll add to this. You'll keep going. Definitely check it out on GitHub, and this will be a continually evolving document. So you can kind of see, I want to go through some of my favorite, and we say content for the help prepare for the DA 100. So in terms of that, I think, honestly, what I tell all of my new employees or someone learning Power BI, go to the Microsoft Learn. It's Microsoft.learn or just Google Microsoft Learn. The official website has the best free training that you will have. It's separated into kind of different stages. You can somewhat relate them. Some of them overlap a bit, but that would be my number one place to go. There's a couple of good books. I think there's a DA 100 book written by an MVP. That would be my next step. I think those are the only kind of resources specifically tailored to DA 100. Excuse me. In terms of kind of going through the trails with the database and data modeling, there's a really, this is kind of Ralph Kimball kind of stuff. So Ralph Kimball has a book out. He was the father of relational databases of star schema. I'm also reading, or I just read a book called The Definitive Guide to Star Schema. I'll try and post these stuff out. Thank you, Manka. I'll try and post some of these out on the chat afterwards. We'll have a few minutes at the end, or I'll post all my links out. There's always I'm not endorsed by. I'm going to mention training. No one's paying me to say this. If it's paid training, it's just because I think it's good and I've done them. But the Microsoft Learn, by far the best free training. Go through that. That will probably get you through most of the red, especially on the right-hand side of the skills. I think a lot what isn't on there is this left-hand side, which is that theory, which really helps you understand and it makes you a better developer, helps you get to the senior, to the architect, or whatever role. So yeah, definitely there's a couple of books I would say for the databases. If you're into Udemy, Coursera, it's a really, really popular topic. One that hasn't changed that much in terms of theory in 20 years. So there is a lot of material out there. I always say with training, it's hard because it's a personal thing. Some people hate reading books. Yes, this is Star Schema, the complete reference. Thank you. This is the one I've just read. This is a fantastic book in the chat. Yeah, thank you. This is the one I was referring to. So absolutely awesome. Yeah, that covers most of this kind of databases side, and it's not necessarily something you always see when you look at Power BI training, is because it won't talk about Power BI, it's talking about data in the database. However, it will make you a much better developer going forward, much better. And this is what sets you apart, I think, from being just someone who does Power BI to being an expert and a senior or an architect or whatever, whichever route you want to go. Visual design, there's a really good book. Someone might get to the link before me. Storytelling with Data is one. Stephen Few is the other one. So anything by Stephen Few, he's really good. It's visual design. Again, there's a lot of courses. You can just kind of find these. That's something that's been around for a long time, right? And the theory hasn't really changed. My advice would be whatever your preferred method. Some people like books, some people don't like books. Some people like videos. You know what? So it's kind of finding something. Look for these kind of concepts though on that. Power BI desktop on the right, you know, Microsoft Learn would be the one, and then just, you know, playing and practicing. So I'm I'll hold that question off, and I'm just gonna go through. ETL process, you know, Power Query. Alex Powers on Twitter does a great 30-day folding challenge, or again Microsoft Learn. ETL process, I've never had any specific books. This one's a bit more evolving, and I think this is kind of keeping up. SQL is really, really good. There's a lot in SQL that's been around forever. It's probably one of the easiest things to find training on. Hannah just said Learn Data Insights. Yeah, that's really good. So that's done by Rishi. He's a MVP here in England. He's fantastic. A really cool method with tokens, and you get a lot for free. So I recommend Learn Data Insights. Tabular models and DAX. So SQL BI is going to be the best source of information. It's one of the best training courses I think you can do for these tabular models. Again, if you just want to look at the individual things, you can probably just find these on YouTube, right, for free. If you don't have the budget, or if, you know, if no one's paying for you to do these courses. I think the SQL BI courses, you know, they're several $100s each. So if you're lucky enough that someone's going to pay, or you're lucky enough to have that sitting around to spend on training, by far, either one, right? They have tabular models, they have data modeling, and they have DAX. They will go to the green and beyond in those courses, right? They will take you through everything here. So absolutely amazing. Otherwise, you know, if you're not lucky enough to be able to get those, just look at YouTube and get to the steps. Governance, same thing. Matthew Roche and Melissa Coates just released some amazing documentation on Power BI. The Power BI official documentation is absolutely amazing. I would regularly check back on it, because they update that a lot with best practices and training, and it gets really, really, really good. Melissa Coates has a governance course, which I've taken. I'm actually speaking at it in a couple of weeks. It is fantastic. It is quite expensive. You get time with Melissa herself. You know, she's absolutely amazing. She's an MVP in the States. She writes a lot of this stuff for Microsoft. I'll try and find these links at the end. So I should have been a bit more prepared, but she covers both the governance and administration here. It is expensive. So if you're, it's about $1,500, I think. So if you can't get that paid, or if you're lucky enough to have that to spend on it, then that's great. Otherwise, honestly, a lot of this stuff's on YouTube, right? If you look at the individual topics, I think this is where the learning map really, the idea is, it's hard to get access to all this training all in one, right? So breaking it down to individual topics, it's a lot easier to give yourself a path and kind of make your own training course on where you want to specify. So I do have a question, and it's in the chat. So who, what, and how are clear. When should we get into data? So that's a really interesting question. I'll let you guys read it in the chat, but it's Manis. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Power BI is a really, really good one because I think it can be entered by anyone. It's designed to be for business users, right? This is kind of the point here of learning these fundamentals or the when. I would say these are bits that maybe, tech people might know, but if you come from a different industry, you might have looked over, and when you start trying to dive into desktop, that's a hard question, right? to know when. I think that really depends on your passion. I know that might sound a bit cheesy, but I think it's true, right? If you don't enjoy learning this, I don't think you'll be doing that well. And it's a quite simple statement, but I think it is really true. If you really enjoy it and you find it interesting, go for it, right? Just learn this on the weekends whenever you have time. If you have, domains, that does help. Certain domains, right? And this is where Power BI is huge. It's by far the leading BI tool. Certain domains, there'll always be a need for specialists in certain domains. I didn't really cover that in slides, but you could be specialist in a domain and knowing how to do that. Like Learn Data Insights, Rishi and his colleague Chris, they do a lot on finance, right? That's pretty much what they focus on. Not on the training website, but in their work. And there's always going to be business for people who are specialists in domains. I think, to be honest, now is as good a time ever to get. I've never seen such a thriving kind of market for this stuff. I think it's unfortunate everything that's happened in the last few years. One thing it has done, just sped up the need. There's a lot of need for people in this space. If you can get around these blues here, do the red and blue paths, it's a good area to be in. I'll say that right now. And just I think this is where you should really start thinking about it if you are. Yep, simple passion versus interest. It's a difficult one to answer without really knowing you as well. So that kind of concludes the learning map now. I'm sure that the format is, this is 1 hour my presentation here. So I guess this is. Do we have some time? Are we opening up?
Sure, we can. We still have a half an hour scheduled. So if anybody has any questions, just unmute yourself or type it in the chat. Just to continue what Steve was saying. So also, free learning resources are user groups all around the world. So pretty much 2 years back, you would need to go somewhere to see it in person. Today, one advantage what happened to us during last 2.5 years is that everything is becoming available online. So search for content, there is a lot of things out there. Kirill, you have a question?
Hey, Steve, thanks for doing the presentation. I really enjoy your content specifically, and just had a quick question on that. So I know you have kind of the blog post on the Power BI, sort of career progression and the skill sets. I know you have the matrix, Power BI skills matrix. The question is pretty simple. With this kind of the new, what you showed here today, is that the updated content, or does that map very well with what you have already produced?
Yeah, that one was actually produced by Seth. So I'm going to be talking with him to kind of integrate that. That one was more an assessment on very specific Power BI. I think it does relate. And I kind of want to update what he's done there and with some stuff. The reason for the map is, and I'll try and get that link to what you were talking about. But so the skills matrix, just for those who probably haven't seen it, it really does 4 parts in Power BI, and it's a bit more generalized and kind of assess where you are and think where you need to go. This is a lot more focusing on a longer term career path, I think, and it's more that thinking about the underlying theory is a lot of it rather than the skills themselves. I think the plan is to update that and integrate it so we have more into the skills map and more assessment. Because one thing assessing where you are, which that does very well. This map, it doesn't, assess where you are. It's more purely show.
Just want to say thank you. I mean, this is really good for people. If you're trying to develop people who work for you, right? You can kind of show them the overall map, and they can quickly see, oh, I'm much more on the right here than I am here, right? So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that's just to that point. This is why I developed it, right? It's going through this developing people. Something I like to do is say, these are the skills you need for maybe as a junior developer, get the red, as a developer, get the blue, as a senior, get the green. And while I say I won't, promote you, assuming you have all these skills, there's what I didn't really talk about, there's those personal skills, and that depends on your type of job, those soft skills as such. But you tick all these skills off, and now you're coming up for your kind of promotion, and that's how I really raise the team. So yeah, that's exactly, I think. So
gives you a good framework as a conversation starter for these conversations. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any thoughts? I know. I'm going to start posting in some of the links as well. I can't hear you if you're. Is that me or?
No, it's me. So just people are probably just looking at the map and trying to figure out what their learning path will be. So while Steve is posting links, if you have any questions, just feel free still to unmute yourself and ask anything. I just put the last slide. So of course, see you next week. Check the schedule on Meetup. So next week is quite busy. On Tuesday, you will have Data Jazz on Tuesdays, and then Wednesday, Melissa Code. So as also Steve was mentioning her, so a lot of great content. So I was one of the fortunate people being on her training, and I can really warmly suggest to anybody who can find some budget for it to do it, because it's really one of the, I would say, probably the best training out there for governance and administration part.
Yeah, and I've put the link there so you can go check it, see if you can get a budget. I put the SQL BI there. They're definitely the best for the DAX and the tabular. I would second that. I'm taking it. I've taken it, and it is just outstanding. She's fantastic. Such a logical way of laying things out. So you'll be very lucky to have her on next week.
Just one remark on SQL BI. So on Marco and Alberto, if you're picking training, go from the beginning, because if you go with DAX optimization and you are not an expert in DAX, it can be really overwhelming.
I would really like to. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And again, maybe look at the map or something like that, and do the fundamentals before you dive into paid training. I think that's a good point. When you do paid training, you want to make your most of it, because you're probably not going to get that chance again. So I always think when you do training, learn the fundamentals. Just go on YouTube, right, or just Google. Just have a little bit of practice, and then coming to the training, the paid training, with some context of what you're learning. And it really helps it stick, I think, especially in DAX. They get deep, they get complicated.
My experience with their training is, if you are not really prepared with the fundamentals, it can be way beyond anything you have expected. Even the things you think you know, you're starting to understand that you don't know it that deep as you thought.
I went to the live one a few years ago in Chicago. One of the nights I went out, had a couple of beers. I was not prepared for that morning. they go hard, and it's intense, but absolutely fantastic. You'll learn so much. But yeah, I second have a little preparation before, and do some pre-learning for the learning.
Manas has a good suggestion, Steve.
That's great. Feel free to comment. You send these to me or go to the GitHub as well. But one plan is to actually make this interactive and have paths. So you want a certain role, you'll follow a certain path, and you can kind of map out, overlay, right? This is the path to get a role. But yeah, no, I like that. Definitely thought of that. And if you have any thoughts on how and want to update and integrate, as I say, this is going to be evolving and it'll continue to evolve because things continue to change, right? The tool continues to change and the layout does. So yeah, really good.
And just for everybody out there, so if you are worried that you will invest a lot of time and struggle find a job, today is not the day for that. I think everybody is willing to hire good, whichever role we were discussing today.
Yeah. And I think that's it, right? I mean, I always don't worry too much about the roles. I think of myself as skills and whether I want to specialize in one area or not. I took data science courses. I've looked at architecture. I've looked at different areas. So it's you're not stuck to one. I think is a good point, right? You can, when you learn stuff, just start learning, and you won't have such a hard time.
Okay, so you see a Microsoft Excel anywhere on this map, Steve?
So I've specifically, when I first started the map, there was a lot more other tools. I was thinking Azure, Excel. I specifically have kept this to Power BI because soon we're going to have, when the maps you get, road maps of an entire country, right? There's so much that could be in here. And this one's specifically designed to be Power BI. I think Excel, if you learn Power Query and DAX, it's going to transfer and all of the skills will transfer. I'm going to keep that off this one just because otherwise it's going to be, there's a balance, right, of being enough information and being focused and useful, because I don't want to just list every skill in the world. So for that reason, no. Maybe it could be an Excel map or a crossover. It might be an alteration, right? I think that would be a good thing for the future. I think that's a really good idea, actually. Yeah, Power Query towards data engineering, definitely data engineering, data science a bit. Yeah, I think data science is interesting because, again, you don't need to be a full data scientist. If you know your Power Query, there's a lot of data science out the box available in Power BI. So, people love the data scientist and love the title. At the end of the day, it's not the best job in the world, right? There's a lot of other stuff. So I think Power Query is definitely it's that side.
Yeah, but even the Power BI itself as a platform is growing in such a huge pace that it's hard to be generalist over the time. So you need to dig somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I quite like that rounded, right? So you know the fundamentals of most of the bits, but there's always going to be areas I think we naturally find more interesting. So go for that. Right? This is as you were saying, it's expanding, right? And I think it's a good time to be in this area. It's a good area that you can do what you want and focus on what you actually enjoy doing.
Probably still more questions will come to your GitHub page. And comments.
GitHub, or add me on LinkedIn or something if you have any questions on it. Twitter, I'm Power BI Steve Campbell. I'm sure you'll be able to find me. I'd love to hear feedback. This is version 1, as you said, it's probably not full there. There's some more I want to alter and add. So I'd love to hear any thoughts if anyone has.
Thanks everybody for a great comments, and thank you, Steve, for joining us and for spending your almost hour and a half with our user group. So everybody who joined, thank you and have a nice evening, and see you next week. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me
Thank you,
speak.
everyone.